Welcome to On the Entrepreneur's Journey. I'm Peter Santry, a former Wall Street exec turned leadership team coach. And this show is where we explore how seasoned entrepreneurs and executives build strong, scalable companies. Today, I'm joined by Scott Watts, longtime COO of Tank Design, a Boston-based creative agency with a global footprint and a client list full of iconic brands. We'll talk what it takes to run a profitable service-based business full of creatives, including how Scott manages scope creep and supports partner transitions and positions Tank Design to consistently punch above its weight. This episode is packed with insights for leaders navigating growth in dynamic service industries. So welcome, Scott.
Hey, Peter, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Good. So let's dive in. Before we get started, I noticed that you had worked with TED and TEDx Cambridge. And as a business coach, a lot of my clients are intrigued by the brand. And I'm wondering how you could comment on, what it takes to sort of get on those shows, but really more importantly, how it contributes to the entrepreneurial ecosystem, because it's such a big presence out there in the market.
Yeah, absolutely. I was super excited years ago to be involved with TEDx Cambridge in the early days, and really sort of seeing them evolve, helping them grow to where they are today. It's an interesting, really interesting. It's been an interesting journey, I'd say. Obviously, getting involved is wonderful, and a lot of people can get involved. Actually, getting a TED Talk, especially at a TEDx Cambridge or TED main stage is super, super, super challenging and hard. But being involved and being around that ecosystem, I think, is tremendous, and really has lots of benefits for entrepreneurs. I think just given the breadth of the talks and maybe for me it was getting a little outside of what we're doing every day and thinking through the sort of the context of gosh, a whole manner of different things. One example was I remember an early pioneer of autonomous car technology, right, from MIT. I think it was out of the Media Lab, and they were talking about the decision they have to make to teach a car that's driving down the street and a stroller is crossing the street at the wrong time, but there's a building to the right and they're going too fast to stop. And do they slam on the brakes? Do they crash into the building knowing it's going to hurt the driver? Or do they go to the car to their left? And literally the thought process and sort of working through how they analyze risk, how they analyze humanity, how they analyze, and then thinking back to, somewhat germane challenges that we try to, deal with every day, and thinking through how we go about, the decision making, the prioritization process, the discovery process, looking for, what's in the best business interest, but what's in the best interest of customers and humanity, and so I think it's things like that are really, really impactful if people sort of open up their mind and can enjoy being part of that ecosystem, part of those talks. I do think it's beneficial no matter who you are or what you do.
Yeah. It's certainly a high bar to get on there, but certainly the people who do are pushing the boundaries of the culture and all that. So it's
Yep.
very interesting. I haven't had the nerve to drive in one of those autonomous taxis yet, but scares me very much. So I might step in though at some point.
That's
So
right.
let's get to Tank Design. Marketing super competitive, and yet you're a medium-sized agency, and you've got lots of premier logos. We on your website you see FedEx, Aetna, Facebook, Morgan Stanley, State Street, to name a few. So a lot of entrepreneurs punch above their weight, like you seem to be doing, without giving away your secret sauce. How do you position the company and differentiate yourselves to capture these accounts?
For the first, maybe 15, almost 20 years of our existence, I think just doing good work for, good companies was enough to generate incremental business with those organizations. And then, as we know, a client leaves one company and goes to another and brings you with them or passes along your name, and things could sort of just organically grow. And I felt like it was a little Darwinian to some degree. If you were doing good work and you were succeeding, then it just kept on coming. And I think things have really evolved where that's not necessarily the case anymore. And for a whole host of reasons, there's a lot more competitors, but really companies are doing a lot more in-house as they should, and building their own capabilities, obviously tools and technologies, most recently AI, but even Figma and things of that nature, and what they allow folks to do internally has made it so that I think, to your question, we really have to focus, every company has to focus on what is it that they can do that's not irreplaceable, but very hard to replace, right? And I think that's where you start going back to, really at the very core, innovative problem solving from a design and brand perspective is one thing that is very hard to put into Chat GPT and get a formidable answer from. So I think that's sort of where our focus has been, figuring out how to make sort of the core differentiator for us something that people can see front and center.
So the sort of the mundane, repeatable stuff is getting mechanized, which is the wrong word, but by ChatGPT or whatever the technology. So you really have to move out the value chain to stay ahead and stay in front of and be employed by those accounts. It sounds like that's what you're doing.
Yeah, for the most part, I think that's a good summary. It's really the consultative and strategic part, of jobs. And then the sort of initial creative ideation, exploration, and really unique problem solving, right? Those are the things, the production, and then to your point, the more repeatable, ongoing things. That's the area that, for understandably, is most replaceable these days.
Right. That's getting disintermediated.
Yeah.
So a common sort of issue, challenge that I get with a lot of service companies is, especially ones with demanding clients, which I'm sure yours are, is the clients push the companies to provide extra services and beyond which was contemplated and when you originally signed them up, price the engagement. And so I know as a COO, you're kind of at the nexus of the responsibility of making sure that the jobs are profitable, and things run smoothly. So how do you make sure that scope creep does not sort of erode your profitability and you're able to have a return on these projects?
That is the single biggest challenge that we deal with today. It's ironic, when we were talking the other day, since then I've probably had no less than 4 or 5 meetings dedicated to this exact topic, and on specific projects or specific client relationships. I think the biggest challenge, at least from our perspective with the nature of the work we do, it's one thing when a client comes to you and says, "Hey, we need this," right? And it's pretty clear to understand and define and document what this looks like. Then of course, questions can come up along the way, requests, add-ons, et cetera, but it's sort of easy to then point back to a statement of work or an agreement, and say, "Hey, well, we assumed there was going to be 3 of those. Now you want 33 of those. This is the cost difference, the time difference, et cetera." That's easy. The bigger challenge that we're facing, and what we're working on, evolving our processes to help us manage, is it's sort of let's say you're redesigning or remodeling your kitchen. You're asking for a price, and before you sign on with somebody, you want to know the price, right? But they don't know, are you looking at a mid-level range stove? Are you looking at a high end? Is it a sort of Whirlpool fridge or a Sub-Zero? And right, and so you have to make an infinite amount of decisions to get a real detailed price and a detailed scope. But especially larger companies are saying, "Hey, I need to go get my budget approved. I need to know what this is going to cost." but we don't know what this is, right? So what you do and what we have historically been very successful with, and to be totally honest, it's getting harder and harder, and we're struggling as of late, as I mentioned, is saying, okay, we know what the strategy phase to determine the end product looks like. Okay, we feel pretty good about that being a fixed price and staying to it. We know what it will cost us to come up with an incredible experience, like sort of design solution, user experience solution. And that part, is pretty locked down. The building of it is the thing that is going to be determined by those first two steps. So in an ideal world, you'd put a TBD on the production cost. But again, as I said, most clients aren't signing off on that. So what you do is you put an allowance to it, right? And just like just like a home builder, obviously I dealt with a house project in the last 10 years. They're sort of giving you an allowance. This is how much for appliances. This is how much for the roof. This is how much, and that's how you have a price. And sometimes you say, hey, you know what? We actually really want that barrel tile roof. We're going to spend more money on that. And it's okay because I think we're going to make the pool smaller, right? And we can take away from here. And then there's trade-offs and you can manage that process. But ultimately, and sorry for the long-winded answer, ultimately what it comes down to is that is a dialogue that happens from the day you start to the day you finish with the client. And when you have a good relationship, between the sort of the main points of contact on each side and a really solid understanding and sort of corporate social contract, right, of what we're doing and how we have to work together, then the dollars can shift back and forth from one line item to the next, right? Things can move around. Ultimately, you end up in a good place. The client's happy. We have a wonderful product. We've helped move their business forward, and we're profitable. When it doesn't work, it's because usually that relationship isn't strong enough, or we were late at really sort of establishing that proper back and forth and understanding.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to, and I think it becomes more and more clear, and you're working in a service business like you are, client selection is so important.
Yeah.
Knowing that client and that you can strike up that relationship and that they're not going to hold you to unrealistic assumptions around your costs, or try to jam you with some scope creep or whatever it is. So it's really important to work with the right kind of client, and the rest are going to be, or the wrong client is a big headache. Profitability, time consumption, and peace of mind for sure. So
Yeah.
that's a great perspective, and having a little variability in there is and an understanding around it sounds like the right approach. So let's tack away to another common challenge that I see, and obviously service businesses are really people businesses in drag, and so what we're trying to do is say, inevitably there's people moving on, equity holders moving on. How do you handle the issue around building a self-managing company so that some of the senior people, as they move on to retirement or something else, that you have the ability to profitably sort of allow them to exit the business and cash in their equity? And I'm sure that's a regular thing because you're a 30-year-old company, and that's something that you must face. And it's a call on cash flow, and it's something you have to plan for.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it helps to sort of break that question into two parts, right? There's the exit part, cash flow, figuring that out. But more importantly, don't even think of it as before you even get to that point. It's super important for particularly sort of a small to mid-sized service business, right? To know that the product is in the people, and if there's too many people that have too many either sort of relationships, secret sauce, know where all the dead bodies are buried, and that's not documented. If there's too many people holding the keys, then you're susceptible to somebody saying, "Hey, you know what? My wife just got a new job, across the country, and we need to move. I got to leave." And And you don't want to be in a position where you're going to lose an account because a person has to leave, right? Or you're going to weaken your competency in an area because a person or two is moving on from the company, right? So it's the same thing that I think allows a company to be stable, that also allows a company to deal with these
Yeah,
transitions,
right.
right? And that is sort of sharing your secrets internally appropriately, documenting that, having the right amount of process, which again is really hard in a service business because, when you have too much process, I sort of feel like it becomes a crutch for the weak, because
Yeah,
somebody can say, oh, well, this is what we do, line, 276, you do this and you do that, and they stop thinking, right?
right,
And so you want there to be flexibility, but at the same time, if there's no process and how to get it done resides in the head of one person, well, now we're in trouble if that something happens to that person, right? So there's this really delicate balance of documentation, passing along information, and sort of process formalization, for lack of a better term. And then that is the exact thing that translates to the, sort of the exit question that you asked, right? We've been fortunate enough, and most companies I deal with, friends or partner companies that are similar to ours that go through exits, have a similar situation where usually the exit's happening because that person is ready to move on, right? And either isn't super attached or involved in the day to day, or isn't involved in a way that would be debilitating to the business and the client relationships, right? In which case, then it can be a nice amicable thing, right?
hmm
And then it becomes, to your point, purely now a financial thing, as in, hey, our landlord just jacked up our rent $500,000, a year. How are we going to handle that? How are we going to manage that? It becomes that. It becomes a financial and a cash flow thing, not oh man, how are we going to retain this client? How are we going to now sell this
right,
competency now that, Sarah's gone,
right.
and so that's why I break into those two separate things, both equally important, but you have to have the first to even get to the second.
Right, right. And creating playbooks to make sure that everything is documented and you can
Mhm.
train the replacement and the secret sauce is retained. And then that creates the conditions for that person to the business to be more self-managing, that person to step away without impacting the business and
That's
doing
right.
that. Excellent. So we discussed a lot of forces affecting your space, sort of AI, sort of changing everything. Um, I guess the question really becomes is how do you get better and how do you learn and how do you incorporate all the change and client feedback and in this dynamic sort of space that you're in, and how do you stay ahead of your clients so that you are offering that high value add experience that they'll pay you for?
That is, I think, not to sound too preachy, but literally, if you're not getting better, you're not looking in the mirror every day, then you're going to have a problem. Maybe not tomorrow or next week, but pretty soon, because we know everything else is evolving around us, and it's something that's super. Um, Not just important to me, but it's a little bit of a thorn in my side, to be totally blunt right now, because you know I feel like one of the hardest things, particularly in creative industries, is to look at yourself and each other in the mirror, because you're putting your heart and soul into what we do. It's not you're not just kind of developing a widget or doing something. It's something that you've put sort of blood, sweat, and tears into. You've come up with this idea. You've come up with this new corporate name or branding or beautiful digital product design. And it's a little bit of your baby that you've given sort of birth and life to. When a client says, "Oh, that's stupid," or "It doesn't work," or things go sideways on a project and fingers start getting pointed, that's a very hard thing to really unpack and be honest about. Um, and so I think in our industry, there's always been the postmortems, or I've been told lately I can't call it postmortems. Retrospectives is I guess a friendlier way to say it, but the reality is, I've sat in a lot of them at different places, at Tank, at other companies, at cross-functional with clients, sometimes with other partner agencies. When people are not willing to have really honest and difficult conversations about, hey, you know what? I love you, Peter, but the way you handled this thing set us all down this path, and this is the wrong path. And we got to get back to that decision point, and how and why did we make it, and how can we make a better decision in the future. Doesn't mean you're a bad person, as I know I saw from your bio, I know you're an old jock as well. I look at it, it would be watching film and only watching the plays that we like. You don't sit down with your team and your coach and look at the things that you did well exclusively. You need to. You need to understand, hey, these are the things. Look when we did it this way. Look how much success we had. Great job, Peter. Great job, John. The reality is, imagine if that's all you did and you walked away. You lost a game by 5 goals, but somehow you're all high-fiving like there's nothing that we can get better on. You could win by 10 goals and you still should focus 80% of that retrospective on how you improve, how you get better. And to do that, you have to have honesty, you have to have thick skin. And as a coach I used to play for said, you stop pointing the finger and start pulling the thumb, and that's what you have to do, and you have to be comfortable with it. So I think companies that can create a culture that allows that type of freedom allows them then to figure out, how do we drive more value for this client next time? How do we improve upon this process? How do we move quicker in this one area? And I think that's really the key to success. Companies who can do that and can do that well, those are the ones that evolve, that innovate and improve upon what they are offering to the marketplace.
No, and I think that internal dynamism and that process of doing that is not only to sort of keep up with the times and what's going on, but with your clients and staying ahead, is something, a practice that I think is not as prevalent as it should be, and I think the times really demand it, and it's just, the world is too dynamic not to do it, and I think that's a great great perspective to bear. Okay, so if somebody wants to learn more about you and Tank Design, what is the best way to get a hold of you or find more information about your company?
Obviously the website's always the best place to start. I'm available on LinkedIn as well. But if somebody goes to the website and puts an inquiry in there, that'll make its way to me for sure. But yeah, always interested to hear different perspectives. I'd love for somebody to tell me, a better way to handle any of the things that we've talked about. I'll practice what I preach. If somebody says, hey, you know what, you're dead wrong with retrospectives, and here's why, I'd say, great, but help me out.
Yeah, good. Okay, well, thanks, Scott, and thanks to the audience for watching On the Entrepreneur's Journey, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Peter. Appreciate it.